Keep it down.
It's really, I'm going with that one.
Good evening. The December 17th, 2018 agenda meeting of the Milltown Borough Council will now come to order. Will the clerk please call roll?
Council President Dixon?
Present.
Councilman Farkas?
Here.
Councilwoman Kerber?
Present.
Councilman Legati?
Here.
Councilwoman Mayer? Here. Councilman Revelinsky?
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we have 6 present.
Thank you. Will the clerk please read the meeting statement?
Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of the holding of this regular business meeting of the Borough Council was provided by the adoption of a resolution and posting, filing, and forwarding of a copy of the same to the official borough newspapers, Home News Tribune, and Star Ledger Publishing Companies on December 10th, 2018. Public participation in this meeting will be permitted during public hearings and after the agenda of scheduled matters has been completed.
Thank you. We are going to dispense with items 4 and 5 until the regular meeting and go right into items for discussion. With that, sale and planning for Milltown water system.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I ask that this be put on here. As you know, and as we've discussed several times here, we've been discussing the options for the future of our water system. One of those options being the outright sale of all assets, resources to a private entity. In discussions most recently with New Jersey American, there's several avenues that can be pursued to do that. And I think, as you know from the events that occurred last Monday and canceled our meeting, we're severely understaffed, and there is a lot of investment that would need to occur at this time in order to maintain our water system and our sewer system operations. Quite frankly, we've got 3 people in the department that should really have somewhere around 12. The time and the money that it would take to just bring on new people and bring that up to speed, the impact to our taxpayers and ratepayers in the form of fee adjustments for all the improvements that are needed for our system are something that I feel we might be better off doing with an outright sale of our system to a licensed private entity such as New Jersey American, Suez, Aqua, Middlesex Water Company, just to name a few of the players that are currently in the state. These organizations have licensed operators. They've got the skill, the knowledge. They're governed by the state in regards to how much they can raise rates. And they would be paying Milltown for the purchase of all of our assets. Part of that purchase, the money that we would receive, it would also go towards paying off all of our outstanding debt and loans for water infrastructure projects that we've had. Some of the options also include a fixed rate system where we can tell them not to adjust our rates for a certain amount of time, as well as any money's brought in, we can also request that they reinvest in our system X amount of dollars over the first several years to help us overcome some of these problems that we face. One of the other benefits is that when you go with these organizations, they've got, many, many more customers than Milltown does. So the benefit being that the costs for improving our system and operating our system, number one, the borough is no longer burdened by it, but number two, that cost is shared by all of their ratepayers. And it's a lot easier to do improvements and fund several $1 million worth of improvements when you've got several 100,000 customers rather than just the 6,000 customers or 7,000 customers that we have in Milltown. So I've distributed, or I've asked Gabriella to distribute some information regarding this. Some of the information provided by New Jersey American, including sample RFPs that we would put out for the sale of our system, some recent success stories, but really wanted to bring this up because the first step in doing so would be to send out an RFP and contract with an engineering firm to provide financial analysis of our current system for an evaluation of sale. And what that would entail is the cost or value of all of our pipes, our tanks, anything we have, as well as all of our debt service that's included, so we can get an understanding of, or a baseline rather, for going out an RFP and provide any potential bidder with the necessary information so that they could provide a price or a quote for the purchase of our system. One of the other things I didn't mention yet is that Milltown would basically at that point be out of the water business. We wouldn't be covering rates. We wouldn't be operating valves. It would be an independent contractor who comes out and services the system. All of the increased regulations that the state requires municipal or any water system to perform would be handled by them, as well as, I know in New Jersey American's case, they do monthly billing, so some of our residents wouldn't experience the high quarterly bills. It would be done on a more regular basis. We wouldn't have our personnel here at Borough Hall or the personnel currently in our utility department handling the billing or any of the repair work out there. So with that said, I'd like to open it up for discussion and get the rest of council's thoughts on this, if any. Any questions, concerns?
Actually, I have a question for the attorney. Doesn't any sale of a public utility have to be by referendum for the voters of the town?
I'm not prepared to answer that question, filling in for John Brood tonight. I can take it to him and get back to you.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that the answer is yes. So this is kind of a little premature. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how many meetings have there been about this proposed sale of the water system? Because I've been to none. I can't speak for anyone else, but I've been to none. This is actually the first I'm hearing about it, other than getting this document. So someone can maybe fill me in on how many meetings there have been and what's been discussed at those meetings, kind of the things like how it's going to impact the residents of the town, how it's going to impact the ratepayers. And then my last point is really, so then what you're proposing, the sale of the system, so we're going to cancel the painting of the water tower, right? No sense in painting the water tower if we're going to sell it. So those are some of my questions.
Well, I'll start with the third first, the canceling of the water tower painting. No, we wouldn't wind up canceling that, but the debt that would be incurred there would be taken on by any entity that winds up purchasing our system. As I said earlier, with all the other improvements that we've done, the cleaning and lining projects, any outstanding debt that we have for the Church Street pump station, if that isn't already paid off, all those improvements, that debt would then become the debt of the private entity. In regards to how many meetings we've had, we've spoken about it up here several times. The last meeting we had was with New Jersey American, I want to say a month and a half ago. Before that, we had met with Middlesex Water Company.
When you say we, who's we?
This would be the utility committee.
Utility. Were you in that meeting?
I actually sat in on the one with the American Water. Middlesex, I wasn't part of that discussion.
Oh, okay.
I believe that was you and Council President Dixon, correct?
Yeah, I think Dorian was there as well. We shared all the information with that, and we've discussed it up here. Basically, Middlesex Water Company had laid out about 4 different options that you have, whether it be they come on as contract ops, meaning that they would provide all the personnel for operating your system. We would retain the assets. We would also retain all the billing responsibilities. And one of the issues that arises with that is it's their license on the line as a licensed operator. So if they tell us we have to do something to improve the quality of our system or abide by their commands, we basically have to dump money right into the system right away and abide by those requirements. So most of the time, these entities don't like to get involved with that because while you're paying them to operate, they feel that they're put at a loss because if you don't do the improvements they feel are necessary to properly operate your system because you don't want to fund it, then they're jeopardizing their name in operating a system that they might feel is subpar. One of the other options was just having them be a licensed operator for us. We maintain everything ourselves. The problem with that is, as I said earlier, we only have 3 people in the utility department right now. And that utility department also covers electric, which is where the town really actually makes money on. Right now, we don't really make money on our water or sewer system.
Well, we did.
Well, costs have gone up, and as we have to do improvements.
Costs haven't gone up $300,000. That's what we used to make every year.
Okay. Well, if you're going to argue every point, sir, then I think we should just have a meeting after this. But if you'll let me finish, I'd appreciate it.
Something to talk about.
So the costs have gone up. We also have to repair things around town. We have to try and fix some of the brown water issues. We have routine leaks or breaks in our system due to the cold weather and our aging infrastructure. We also have a litany of projects that have been on the books for years for us to try and step forward, but haven't been funded because of our concern of the impact financially to our ratepayers. And the fourth option, as you had actually indicated to me as the, quote, nuclear option several meetings ago, your words, not mine, was the outright sale of the system. And after careful consideration, while we still have some financial analysis to do, I think it actually serves the best purpose for the borough and as the best option for us to move forward. In regards to your question regarding a public referendum, the first thing we would still need to do is actually get the analysis out there, put out an RFP to understand what the offers would be, and then compare those valuations to ourselves and determine whether or not we should proceed with a sale. It could be done via public referendum. There is also an alternate route that would help expedite things and allow the borough to receive additional funds for fair market value of the system by not utilizing the public referendum method. I believe it's called the WIP, and it would only be stopped by a 15%, if I'm not mistaken, memory serves me correct, 15% petition by the residents. So 15% of the residents petitioning, stating that they don't feel we should move forward with it, and then it would have to resort back to the referendum. But truthfully, the issue that we have at hand is that time is of the essence. Whether we wind up allotting for 7 or 8 more positions for next year within our utility department, as well as funding some of the improvements that we need to do for exercising valves per new DEP requirements, we need to take action. As we've seen with our lineman applications, it's taken us months and months and months just to get in resumes. So to find qualified personnel to work at the borough who know how to operate a system and can truly come in that don't need as much training is going to be very hard to come by and to find that labor cheaply. So again, I think that after evaluation of what has been presented to us from New Jersey American and other literature that's available, I think the sale of our water system is probably our best bet.
Okay, the only other thing I'd like to say is that it's not hard to get people to work, but when you ask people to do impossible tasks, that's what's hard to do. What needs to be done is the water utility and the electric utility need to be split. And then you can hire linemen who do electric for the electric utility, and you can hire utility people to do the utility work in the water and sewer. We operated with 5. So I hear your number is about 13, but that's way out there in left field. We did it with 5. We need 2 or 3 more qualified people, and we can run the utility correctly.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of questions, if that's okay?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. One is just a point of just clearing something up. Councilman Revelinsky said that he shared this information and we've spoken about it several times. That's not true. Maybe once, maybe twice I'll give him, but several is not a correct statement. So just so everybody knows, this is a surprise to most of us up here. It hasn't been discussed several times. It makes it sound like we've been discussing it for months and months and months, and that's not the case. Second thing, if Councilman Revelinsky could just verify for me, in your discussions with the companies that you've met with, I'm sorry, I apologize, I haven't read that whole packet, and I skimmed through it, you know, being honest. If we were to go with a new company and there's a water line or a sewer line break, is it that they bought the utility but the line is still ours and we'd be responsible for that? How would that work?
No, this is where the assets, the sale versus something of a, I forget the term exactly, and I apologize for that, but the licensed operator / maintenance crew, the difference in that would be, if we sell the system, the assets, meaning all the pipes, the water tower, the pump stations, is the responsibility of that entity. So if there's a break, they're governed by BPU in regards to when they have to come out, the notifications that need to be provided to residents affected, and all of that. So it's the same rules and regulations that we actually follow, but BPU is a little bit more strict when it comes to the private entities, like New Jersey American or Middlesex Water or Suez. They govern them a little bit more tightly. And additionally, when it comes to rate increases, any rate increase proposed by those public or private utilities rather, has to be presented with all sorts of background document and information to BPU before they're allowed to effectuate any rate change. It's not left up to a governing body to say, oh, we need some more money, things aren't looking right, we can just raise it. They actually have to do this years in advance for planning.
Okay.
Typically, on average, they go up about 1 to 2% a year.
Okay, thank you. I would say, I'm not positive on if it's the last year or the last 2 years. Maybe, I know for sure in 2018, the water utility did not make money because we had to recoup some of the money we went overboard on in 2017. But before that, I believe the water utility was a moneymaker for Milltown. And is just the sale of our water utility how we're going to recoup some of that yearly money that goes into our paying the salaries or doing water lining for that particular utility? Is that included in the money that for sale? Is that part of the sale money?
I think you're confusing the two issues. Would you mind clarifying? I'm
no problem.
A little lost by your question.
Before 2017, our water utility made money and always had a surplus each year and every year. My question is it the intent of this council that when we sell the water utility, that sale money is what we're going to use to recoup some of that surplus that we would have been having every year?
To an extent, yes. And I'll say to an extent because without an evaluation of what the system is worth and offers on the table, we don't know how much money that would be. Now, years ago, we passed an ordinance that you weren't allowed to take the surplus from water rates and dump it back into the municipal budget.
Well aware.
Well, I'm just, so we're not
But
necessarily.
it does pay the salaries, it does pay for improvements in our...
For that particular department, right?
That's correct.
So what we'd be relying on essentially if we were to remove our water and sewer liability from the borough and have only electric would be funding those salaries. But the sale, basically what it does is it also wraps up all of our debt service. So a lot of our rates that come in go to not only paying for the water purchased and the salaries and the vehicles and all the other things that go to operating a system, but it also goes to all of our debt service. So by selling, we actually eliminate all the debt service there associated with it as well. And through some of the options that are laid out here, and I'll ask that, no one needs to make a decision tonight, but please look through this information. And if we can have another meeting with them, whether it's bringing those folks in again for one group and then the next group, so we're not all in the room at the same time, more than happy to do that and coordinate it. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. But the finances are better because we are able to put in our RFP for a final sale to say things like, you can't change our rates for 5 years.
Okay.
You have to reinvest, which is one of the examples they put in here was they required a reinvestment, a town that recently sold about the same size as ours. I think it was $7 million in the first 5 years. They put in about $10 million in improvements in those first 5 years. So these are things that if we didn't do, and as Mr. McClellan had stated a couple meetings back, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 million to eliminate the brown water issues in town. That's going to come at a cost to the residents in forms of a rate increase. This is something that essentially we'd be able to pass on to a private utility company mandating that they do take these steps without it necessarily impacting our rates because they can spread it amongst all of their other customers.
Okay. My last question, and I apologize.
No, it's fine.
We briefly glanced on a time frame that we're in very early stages. Am I correct in that? What I would like to see or maybe not selling our utility, but a plan on how to right the ship. What's wrong with it? Personnel is, I guess, the top issue as far, from what I'm understanding, is maybe we can have a comparison on how much it would be to fix what's broken, to get us back on track so that we can have a surplus each year opposed to selling the utility. That's something that I would really like to look at, and I'm sure you would as well.
Right.
And maybe that's something we can do if we're in the early stages. We can do both instead of just going straight down, tunnel vision down one way.
Right, no, and I agree. I think, you know, that's part of the other hand at the same time is, number one, what we should be doing if the sale is a viable option, which a lot of towns are actually leaning towards these days, because many of them have done a contract operations where they've had an outside entity operating their system, monitoring their system, maintaining their system, and they've just done the billings. They've moved towards when the superintendent retires, there's no one left at the helm. They've said, you know what, it's time. These guys have done it all along. It's time for us to really unload, for us to bring on more people, more personnel. But it's something that Trina and I have even spoke on, that we want to do an evaluation on those costs, but to also be able to compare them as to what the benefit would be from sale, we need to get the numbers in place, and part of that is to do an evaluation on our system on the costs or the valuation of what we could potentially see in receipt if we sold, so that we can compare the two and see what sort of investment we would have to make versus what sort of gains we would get by selling at that time. So essentially, though, to put some sort of time frame on this, I think we should have a decision to move forward no later than the end of March, because if it does go to public referendum, we want to make sure we have our ducks in a row for the election in November, for a public referendum and public vote on it, and also better understand, because this will impact our budget for next year. We need personnel, and while Councilman Farkas says 2 or 3 more people, I disagree, simply because if we look at South River, which is not a whole heck of a lot bigger than us, they serve a larger population, but the amount of pipes and things that are in the ground there is similar to ours. They've got 5 in their electric, 5 in their water, 5 in their sewer. That's 15 people. Now, do we need 15? No, but we've got some folks that are starting to get up in age that we need to start really bringing in people to train the younger group, so that we can kind of cherry pick from that to see who's really going to make it and be the next leaders. And right now, you know, we've only got 2 people and 1 laborer, 2 experienced people, 1 laborer and 1 gentleman who's actually still out. But a lot of the work is being done by our utility director, and that's really not what he should be doing. His job should be to oversee and coordinate and direct the work, not to be there with a pair of pliers in his hand connecting wires, or, you know, a shovel in his hand. So
I hear what you're saying, but to Councilman Farkas's defense, I think he was referencing multiple years of operating the water and sewer utility on a surplus with 5 or 6 people. I think that was what he was referencing. If we can get back to there, we'd probably be better off. I think that's more or less where he was coming from. I appreciate all your work. I think it's a viable thing for us to look at, but I definitely would like 2 comparisons, and, you know, not to make more work for you or anything like that. I'm not on the utility committee, but some public meetings so the public can maybe weigh in before it has to go to a referendum might be a good idea. I'm just spitting stuff out at you, and I apologize.
I can also see if they can come down for a council meeting too, as well. I mean, this is, things have started to progress somewhat quickly, and after the last meeting, you know, the time frames became really more apparent as to when we would need to act in order to get things moving forward, because it still leaves us over the next 12 months with limited resources. And by that I mean the personnel.
No, listen, I understand, you know, you have a hard job, it's broken, you're trying to fix it, and I appreciate your hard work as well.
Yeah. So, and I will say that I am on the utilities. I sat in on the sales pitch from American Water. I didn't go to Middlesex Water, but, you know, I appreciate Councilman Revelinsky's diligence in going out and getting this information because we all know the quality and the service of our water is important. And so, but we have discussed after this, what we just talked about, sort of doing the, comparing apples to apples, the cost and the benefit. I mean, the first question would be, what happened with our utility department? What's the cause of the, not having enough people, not getting, the infrastructure? What have we done to not address the things that need to be done? The second thing is, while this was a very good sales pitch, we really don't have any figures around it yet. I mean, my main concern was, what will the cost be for the residents? Also, we don't have the price, which we won't know, unfortunately, until we send it out for the RFP, correct, Councilman Revelinsky?
Yeah, and I don't mean to cut you off. As far as, I just want to touch on a few things, and, this is a good conversation. This is the start of things, but comparing the costs, absolutely, we need to do what happened to our utility department. Part of that is a result of increasing regulations from the state. I mean, we saw it with the lead and copper sampling. They basically cut the allowable limits by, 100 or 1,000 for the allowance of lead, and that resulted in a lot of additional sampling requirements and reporting requirements that have come about. We spoke earlier this year about potentially buying a valve operator, because the state has mandated that you operate your valves, I believe, every valve twice a year. Also mapping of your entire system. Right. So there's a lot of build-up costs just directed at us from the state.
Right.
The personnel to do that, I mean, we looked at that valve operator, it was $70,000, or you could hire someone to go out and do it for you for $70,000 every year. Right. It would still take, I think John's estimate was 2 people for 30 days, 30 working days, so about a month and a half just to do that. This also eliminates all of our meter reading, eliminates our billing. The cost to the residents, which is where I definitely wanted to point out, was that the cost to the residents for the first initial however many years, and we could set this by RFP, is nothing. Residents would not see a change. In fact, one of the tongue-in-cheek comments I made to New Jersey American was, they said, well, basically what happens is when you sell and you dictate in your RFP what the rates can be, and we've had towns say, you can't change our rates for 3 years, and we adopt your rates. I said, so the council meeting before we sell, I could drop my rates down to half. And he goes, well, you could. Right. We'd appreciate it if you don't, but you could. And they did comment on our current rate structure, and it's very close to what theirs is now.
That just doesn't sound 100% right. Like, we could say, okay, we're dropping everybody's rates, and then they're going to have to, they're going to say, okay.
I mean, obviously,
Sure,
their
that's
RFP,
fine with
they'd say, wait a second, we could change things around, but that's, they said, we adopt your rates. That was
too early.
So they
I'm
adopt our
sorry?
rates, we could put a stay on rate increases, and then any rate increases they have to submit to the Board of Public Utilities for approval. And as I stated earlier, their current rate increases is somewhere around 1% to 2% a year, 1% to 3% per year, and they submit those on a 3-year rolling. So they'll say, next year you're up 1% or 2% or 3%.
No, I get it. And, as I told you, I just think it would be nice to flesh out this and other things with some numbers. But, I appreciate you giving us this, to give everybody a heads up. I think that we still have more, a little more digging to do, but I think this is a good start just to see what else is out there and, pitch it to everyone, and then once we have the full numbers, then I think it'll be easier for everyone to see the pros and cons of it.
Right, but one thing you keep commenting on is the full numbers and the full scope of costs. Not even
cost, what they're willing to pay.
Right, and we won't know that until we have an evaluation of the system, a true valuation by an independent company that's done this in the past, to say all their pipes in the ground, based on their age, based on your infrastructure, this is what they're worth. All of your water tower is an asset. Your interconnection with East Brunswick and New Brunswick and North Brunswick is an asset. Your pump station is an asset, or is it a liability because of its age? These are all the things that a private entity, and it's typically an engineering firm as well as an accounting firm, compare all of these costs and say, this is what current market value of your system would be, what you could anticipate bringing in.
Do we know that number right now?
Well, No, we don't, because we don't have an evaluation of the system. You have to pay someone to do that evaluation. So that is the first step towards moving anything forward. And it sounds like we've got enough support to at least really consider this, knowing what we're up against in the future, is to put together an RFP package for someone to do that evaluation for us and return those numbers. Because hypothetically, and I'm just going to spitball numbers, let's say our system is valued at $20 million, but we've got $13 million in debt service. We would get a check essentially for $7 million. Or we could say, don't cut us a check. I want that $7 million rolled right into improvements in the first few years. So those are the type of things we can format in our RFP once we have the dollars and cents at hand.
Something to bring up and discuss.
If I may? Thanks. I'm just jotting down some things as listening to the council speak, and I think all the way around there was a lot of really good comments and a lot of good suggestions. My suggestions to Councilman Revelinsky would be this, is to make sure that all council members have the invite to participate and help in any way they would with this endeavor. This is really, really a large endeavor, and I think to try to put it on the shoulders of just a couple people might be a little bit of a heavy lift. So if you would be open to that, I think that might be a good suggestion, because some of the council people spoke, you know, a little emphatically over, you know, things that they thought or they think might be a benefit or a way to handle it. And I think maybe if we can get people to work together on it, we could get a clearer picture of what the various scenarios could be. And in my mind, to kind of simplify things, it basically comes down to these. You could sell it off, okay? You could have the firms come in, find out what it's worth, and you could sell it off. Fix the current department we have. What do we need to do? What would we need to spend and what would we need to do in order to get the proper personnel to come in and work? And to make it so Milltown can still have their own water department. Because there's a lot of benefits, as you know, of having your own when it's functioning well. And, you know, middle of the night you get a water main break, the guys live in town, they're there in 15, 20 minutes and they can take care of it. So what would it cost to get that, rebuild the department? And then another part would be is help from a neighbor, interlocal agreements with perhaps the South River or whomever, to help bolster our own department through an interlocal agreement. And not just a, hey, if you have a problem, give us a call. I'm talking something in writing, a contract that you have with another community, and you have them, you work together, share employees, share the cost of equipment, things like this, like a real legit interlocal agreement. So, and on a final thing, I definitely am with Councilman Farkas on the idea of a referendum. Everybody in this town, everybody who has a water connection or a sewer connection to their house is a stockholder in this endeavor, and they need to be heard. So I think it's incumbent on us to make sure we put together a package completely so people can understand the various aspects of it. Public meetings held so they can come in, have their voices be heard, and then the council can figure out, based on all the work that is done and the input from the stockholders, where we need to go with this. It's their system, they own it, they deserve to have their voices heard. Hey, I heard them very loud with this meeting, we raised the rates up to get 300 grand back, and everybody went nuts, and rightfully so. How did we get to that point? Okay, so I think going through all of this, as Councilwoman Mayer was saying, you know, how did we get to this point?
Well, that's exactly the
And I think
conversation
going
we've had.
through this exercise, we're going to find exactly how we got to this point, and we're going to decide which is the best way to go.
Right.
So I think you're all onto something here.
What you said is exactly what we've discussed, through the cost of getting the department back to where it would need to be versus the cost of this versus, you know, and all under the guise of trying to get the best long-term solution for the water customers of Milltown.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're all on the right track. I think if you work it all through together and figure it all out, I think we'll be in good shape. So my suggestion would be is proceed and work well together and try to get these things hammered out.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, just to add to it, Mr. Mayor, is when you mention interlocal help, one of the issues that we have currently is our director of utilities is too busy with a shovel in his hand to even assist on certain coordination aspects, and that's no fault of his own. He's just trying to get the job done. So we have South River, but they have their own needs. North Brunswick actually has contract ops with New Jersey American, so they have someone else operate their system. While I'm for it, and I think it's a great move to reach out, I don't know how much help we're going to be able to get in order to especially respond to those nighttime activities, those breaks that occur on the weekends or at nights, because even the other day when we had a break out front and Borough Hall flooded, we had another break, and we had to call in our private contractor.
Well, I mean, that's really another option too, whereas if you have your own department, if you can bolster it with contracts with firms that have the personnel that come in.
Well, I'm just expressing that
right.
Those are also additional costs that we have to then finance. So one of the things, serving as the utility chairman for the past 2 years, that I've seen is a lot of times our money seems like it's up, and then we get a force main break in North Brunswick that chews up $100,000, or a water main break over here that chews up another $40,000. So that in turn comes to back on the borough's responsibility of where does that money come from. That gets chewed up, and we say, well, maybe we should push off that other improvement project another few years because we just raised the rates because all of our surplus got chewed up last year. So one of the things I feel council needs to understand too is that their improvement costs, the future costs, are certainly covered with an outside entity, whereas we would continually need to plan, budget, prepare, and put that back on the ratepayers as well. So that is just something it really shines out as the true benefit of this without it being just the department. But I think what I'd like to do is nonetheless get a consensus from council here to start drafting up an RFP so we can get a true valuation, because we won't know anything in regards to the cost or value of our system, of what we could obtain for the sale of our system, and start comparing numbers without a true valuation and RFP or presentation and analysis by an independent firm.
Before we do that, let me just make another suggestion. A few years ago, we had a problem with a substation that was in the floodplain. And what we did is we formed an electrical substation committee, a committee of volunteers of very good, dedicated people throughout the town. That project went as well as a project could be done. Just walk out the door and look left, you'll see how nice it looks, no problems, no issues. Let me contrast that with the abortion that we have across the street right now. When I suggested that, I was turned down 2 years ago to form a committee for the Public Works / fire station project. So my suggestion would be, let's learn from our mistakes, let's form a committee, because actually right here in the Haddonfield, in your documents, Haddonfield, first line is the second paragraph. In 2013, the borough formed a volunteer community advisory committee to take an independent look at the system. So this is not a novel thing to Milltown, this is what other towns do. Put a good committee form a committee of good dedicated people, let them do this independently, and then we can do the things that you said. But let's get other eyes on this before we make a mistake.
I, for one, support that 100%. I mean, you can't argue with it.
I have a question. When it comes to New Brunswick Water, when the contract is up, do you think we could do month to month, or we're going to have to sign the contract in 2020? If we're going to take our time and not get through this too fast, that's when the contract is due.
I know that the borough attorney's not here. He has a colleague here tonight, so I know a little about the contract, but that's really a legal question as to whether or not it can be done or not, Councilman Kerber. So I would suggest that that be referred by your clerk to the borough attorney for further analysis relative to the ability to modify or meet the requirements of the New Brunswick contract.
Okay, thank
And
you.
when's that contract up?
March or April 2020. And they gave a guideline in New Jersey American Water, pretty much by the time you get everything in place and chosen whoever you're going to go with, and they said whether us or another company. They also had that option where they would be the source and we would do the maintenance. So there is that other option as well. By the time, 2020 comes, that's when everything would be implemented and take place and work out, if we keep on pace with it, the meetings and discussions. And I know for a fact, Councilman Revelinsky has mentioned it at meetings, but we didn't discuss this until today. So it has been mentioned a number of times that we were thinking about doing this, and he would get back to us with more information. And this is the time he's providing the information. So it's not just mentioned tonight. The information we were provided was for tonight. But he has mentioned it in past council meetings, correct, Gabriella? About the sale of the water?
Not several.
Okay. Still, it was mentioned a couple times.
One or
not just-
two, not several.
That's fine.
Okay.
But I know we didn't have discussions on it,
Well,
but we
you
are
wanna-
tonight.
You want to contradict what I say? I'm going to contradict what you're saying. I
Well, you said it wasn't
It has been
mentioned.
mentioned once or twice, but not several. Just a point of clarification.
Okay.
Anything else on this point? Councilman?
Yes, while I think a committee could be beneficial, and I certainly would like to hear back from the residents, and if we want to form a committee, that's fine. But I just find it difficult to think that anyone is going to be able to, on a committee level, fully wrap up all the cost analysis and understand what we would get for the valuation of sale of our system from private entities unless they've done it. That type of committee is going to take years to get through all of the data that's out there and try and come up with something that we hope is accurate. Whereas if you have an outside firm do the valuation on your system and say what it's worth, you know in a short period of time from professionals that their report would be relied upon by any bidding entity if it were decided to actually sell the system. Their report would be relied upon for accuracy, not the report of a group of individuals, granted committed to the borough, but who most likely do not have any sort of expertise in this whatsoever, and are kind of winging it. So
I don't think that Councilman Farkas meant that you'd have residents actually doing that work, but that would fall under the direction of a committee to get that information. I believe the same thing was done for the electric subcommittee.
It was.
Where they had a evaluation of the electric department done. And that was something that a group of that subcommittee, I believe.
right, but they weren't looking at the cost of every pole, transformer, and wire in town. They were looking at the cost of rebuilding a substation in one location versus
Well,
building
no,
it
there was
another.
evaluation of the entire electric system. Is that
Right.
correct, Councilman Farkas?
That is correct.
Yeah,
And
there was,
certain
it
members were
was,
tasked.
what was the value of the whole electric department, the whole kit and caboodle? So that
Some of
that
them
was
were
actually
tasked
done.
to see if anybody wanted to purchase it, and they had to do that exact
Correct.
evaluation.
Right.
And they went and did it,
Right,
soup to nuts.
yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, would it be
bit
your
easier.
recommendation that the Finance Committee do some financial analysis?
Well,
Okay.
that's why, I mean, like I said, I mean, here's the discussion, and it's getting better and better, and I like it. And, yeah, I mean, there's so many things for all of the council
So-
to sink their teeth into
So, I mean,
and
I
get
think-
things done.
This, like you said, Councilman Revelinsky said it would be good to have American Water's pitch brought, to more people. But what I was saying to his point about, getting the numbers together, we have a finance committee that could do the analysis of how much it would cost to hire 5 more people in the utility department,
Right.
and this would be the benefits, and this would be the, you know, so to start coming up with those type of numbers to have something to present to a committee. I mean, that's in-house stuff.
We might have some folks in town that do work for financial institutions and have a lot of knowledge in these things that we need to have done. So there's a lot to that I think would be very beneficial. And it's not that I think it should be done, well, you know, really, there's two ways to do it. I believe the electric subcommittee was done without really council intrusion.
Okay.
There was a council member who attended and, you know,
Okay.
watched the goings-on.
Gotcha.
But even if you have this, and they could report to, like, the financial aspects, come to the finance committee, so that those council people can work along with them as it goes. That doesn't necessarily mean they need to be in the meeting, but they can work along in a parallel way, being fed the information that's being gathered.
Right, right,
And I think that would help it go a little quicker.
gotcha.
But again, these are things that, through discussion to council, you guys are really coming up with some good ideas in order to move this thing forward. So, anything else on this? Well, then we'll move on. Miscellaneous engineering items.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just a couple of items to discuss tonight. Ongoing work continues at the Public Works Complex. Most of the retaining walls are completed. They're currently preparing the analysis from the contractor relative to the costs, if any, which may be incurred due to the review of the plans by the architect. We anticipate to having those numbers in very shortly, and I believe that'll be brought to course. As we talked earlier, the tank is scheduled to begin work sometime in February, and we anticipate completion on or around Labor Day, which is, I'm sorry, not Labor Day, Memorial Day, forgive me. So it should be in the time period that we requested. On that, we're ready to answer any questions, should there be any from the council.
Any questions for the engineer?
And the last thing is a healthy, happy holiday season to the council and the people of Milltown from our friends from CME.
Thank you very
Mike.
much. Any other?
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, it's maybe for you, maybe for Mr. McClellan, because you gave the update on the DPW firehouse. We're supposed to, when we did the special projects coordinator, we were supposed to get a report from that, or is that supposed to go to the full council or to you, Mr. Mayor, or how does that work exactly?
That goes to the business administrator, who is to disseminate it to the council.
Okay, so, and that is, I thought we agreed on a bi-weekly report? Correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so the problem I have with that is we haven't, first of all, other than what we get right here at the meeting, and I have two. One for August to October, one for November and December. To me, it doesn't really look like a report. It looks more like a 3-paragraph essay. And I got the report tonight in front of the meeting, and ironically, from August until November, the work, it's the same thing on both sheets. So Mr. McClellan gives a small update, but I don't have any update being here on the Borough Council about what is actually going on across the street, because this certainly doesn't cover it. It's not a detailed report. It's a summary, and I would like to know who is getting a detailed report, and I would like to, so copied from both things. The first paragraph, work substantially completed. The entire site has been cleared and graded to a subgrade level. A majority of the regulated materials have been removed from the site. Okay, I could tell that by driving over there. Utility, storm sewers, sanitary sewers, and water lines have been installed from the back of the project. That's on both. The retaining walls are now approximately 85% complete. Now this month, the retaining walls are now at 90% complete. Upcoming work, continue construction of the retaining walls. Okay. Several meetings have taken place. Where's the detail in this? I mean, from reading this, I cannot tell what is going on, if there's problems. They mentioned that there might be unforeseen conditions. Well, what would they be? I mean, I think as council people of the Borough of Milltown, we have the right to know what is going on with that project and any potential issues or cost overages that are going on, and I don't feel that this essay addresses that. Mr. Barr, do you feel that we could maybe get a more detailed project report?
Absolutely.
And I believe you've asked for that, haven't you?
I talked to him at the end of last week, because we were closed on Tuesday. So I talked to him Thursday, and I guess he had prepared this to give me Thursday
Well, with all due
afternoon.
respect, this was going back to, the first one was from the November 19th meeting. I got the email from you on November 20th, which is a month ago. So in a month, we should have had more than just one additional report if you asked in November for a bi-weekly report.
You are correct.
I'd just like to add one more thing. We got handed this so-called report. It's about 15 pages. 1 page from the project coordinator, 14 pages from the architect. If the architect is going to do the report, what do we need the project coordinator for? 14 pages of pictures and summary from...
I will certainly pass your sentiments on to the,
I mean, so, and who, by the way, tracks all of the goings-on over there? I mean, I know we had an incident over there, and, you know, we have other things coming up, correct?
Yes.
So where does that information, who collects the, you know, we spent 20 hours doing this, we spent 10 hours doing this? Is that something that we follow?
if that's the kind of information that you would like,
Well, when we did the hiring, it was going to be
Then that's-
12
that's
hours
what
a
we'll-
week for,
yeah, we will.
Overtime, or, you know,
I will
over and
make sure
above.
that there's a more succinct report in the future.
a succinct report, and also tracking of the amount of hours it takes to do that. That, which is what we sort of said when the resolution was passed. We were concerned about this happening, and now it's happening. That we were not getting full detail, and who's watching out for the Borough of Milltown. That's supposedly why we did this, correct?
You are correct.
So then I would like to see that somebody is actually doing that, that's been paid $5,000 already, and I have 6 paragraphs of general work that's been done, or, you know, summarized.
We'll take care of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other miscellaneous engineering items?
None from us.
All right, audience comments. Please state your name and address for identification on the tape. Please remember that we are discussing things discussed in the, thank you.
Phil Zambrana, 40 Van Loo Avenue. So the potential sale and planning for the Milltown water system, I think it's something that should be obviously discussed. It's a good idea. But is there a rush to do this? Is there a timeline? Is this potential discussion for the sale and planning tied to what happens at Ford Avenue? I'm just trying to figure all this out.
For Ford Avenue, the borough would be on the hook for upgrades to the system with minimal contribution associated or provided by the developer.
Yeah.
So there is a cost there. The true rush here is that we're operating with a very, very limited staff.
I understand.
And with improvements needed, especially the brown water and the line breaks, we're just hemorrhaging money. And the further we put it off, and the further we put off replacing our force main or doing improvements to the system, the worse it's gonna be, so.
So much like we did with the electrical substation, I have to agree, put together a committee, bang out some ideas. It worked then, I don't see why it wouldn't work now. I understand there might be some time constraints. I understand there might be something tied to Ford Avenue, but we have no idea what the value of our water system is right now. We have to go to a third party?
They base it on the materials of construction, the improvements you've done, the age of your system, the other assets, the number of users you have, what your rates are. They truly look at it as a holistic approach and say, you know, what is it going to cost us to maintain? What are we going to have to put into it? And how much are we going to get out of it? They look at it as a true business model.
This sounds like a great idea. It sounds like too good to be true. And usually when something sounds too good to be true, I have to sit back and say, why would someone want to come in and give us that kind of opportunity or that kind of agreement where I don't see them actually making a profit for 5 to 7 years, depending on the...
No, it's a long-term play.
It's a long-term play.
It's always a long-term play. So
why would they want to do that? And then, you know, 7 years later, just whack everybody's rates up.
Well, it's not that they can just whack them instantaneously. Yeah. It's a long-term play. Middlesex Water Company, regionally speaking, they've got a lot of towns within the county already. So, you know, their desire to have Milltown as well, and they provide to East Brunswick water supply. Utilizing Milltown and interconnection just helps them strengthen their current position. So, and the same thing with New Jersey American. They've got a couple million customers throughout the state. So last year they stated they put in $385 million into improving their system. You know, those costs are spread amongst all of their ratepayers and not just, you know, if we have to do $5 million, or I think the current estimate for the low end, Mike, for the force main that we discussed was $8 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Sewer force main?
Yeah, the sewer force main was $8 million. Dumping that on the residents in Milltown with a 20-year loan is extensive, whereas they'd be able to spread that out amongst others.
Do we have any idea what the surplus is of the water and sewer utility right now, as of today? Do we know what that number is? Estimate.
No, it looks like from the last report I received from our tax collector that we have made up the $300,000 in the 6 months as anticipated, but we still have to compare. The budgets are a funny thing in that it's a 2-year rolling. So at the end of 2018, what we're actually looking at, or have to look at by law for the 2019 budget, is the end of year for 2017. They don't let you, because they assume there's still outstanding bills and outstanding debts that have not been paid or billed yet, invoiced yet, so they make you look at 2017 for planning the 2019.
And you have all the information that you need for water and sewer from New Brunswick. You're not waiting for anything, right? You have everything.
As far as to determine the value of the water system?
No, not the water system. I'm talking about water rates in general. So my understanding is that you get reports, you get data from New Brunswick. So when's the last time that you received any data or rates from New Brunswick?
We get billed from New Brunswick for water and sewer.
Right.
We've gotten third quarter billings.
Third quarter, so that's through September?
Yes.
Okay. So it's December now. Is that the way New Brunswick does it? They just, are they behind? Is anyone like, I'm basically looking, is anyone lighting a fire under New Brunswick?
We'll get the fourth quarter sometime probably in February.
That late?
Yes.
Wow. And no one's making a stink with New Brunswick? We're just letting them do that?
I have several phone calls in trying to get a meeting with somebody over there.
Okay. Okay. Then my next question is the water tower. So you're removing antennas from the water tower? Antennas?
Temporarily, yeah.
Mobile access?
Yeah.
Okay, how will that affect people in town? Not?
They bring, good question. They bring a portable antenna, erect it on the site, and then put
Okay.
the antenna on the portable antenna.
Okay.
So there really should be very little disruption. That's what the general process is. We'll know more tomorrow, but that's what.
Okay. So my last item is, I think it's really, really hysterical that you're calling for a referendum for water and sewer when you wouldn't even suggest having one for the municipal complex. I think it's hysterical that you bring that up.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Alan Godber, 4 Fern Place. I think this has been a very interesting and polite discussion this evening, exactly the way it should be, and I'm pleased to hear all sides of an issue being discussed without people yelling at one another. This is the way all government should work, and I congratulate you on doing a good job on that. I do think the idea of having a public a committee or committee to study the issues of water is important. The electric one did work very well. I attended some of those meetings, and there was a lot of good expertise and very good discussions at that. And the public should be involved in this. After all, it affects us not only now, but for generations. So it's our right living in the town to have some input into this, and I think the members of the council should be in favour of everybody being involved and being heard, and then making some sensible decisions. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I will close the audience comments and accept a motion for adjournment.
So be it.
Second.
I have a motion by Council President Dixon, seconded by Councilwoman Kerber, non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll take about a 5-minute
I'm
recess.
freezing. It's so cold. Jack up the heat in this.
I'll go see if I have any heat. Turn it up a little bit.